Can I ask you, Mark, how old you are?
I'm 45.
45. All right. So you're not old enough. Well, I guess you are a Gen Xer, right?
Yeah.
Ian, you're barely a Gen Xer,
42,
right?
yeah.
42.
Last year.
I was watching the music video for Gotta Get Away by The Offspring. You familiar with the...
My high school band opened for them.
For The Offspring?
Cool.
No way, for real?
For real.
Awesome.
Wow, cool. What's your band called?
A really crappy high school band no one's ever heard of.
What year did they
let's
open?
shout 'em out.
This was literally like a month before Smash came out. This would have been like 1993 at the Madrona Hill Winery, which is a venue in Portland that no longer exists. Which, by the way, it's a really bad idea to have underage bands playing at a winery.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Throw it out there.
So the Offspring story, I was reading about it. So when I was younger, they were like my favorite band. When I was like a little kid, learning how to play guitar, and now they're just amazing corporate shills. They fired their drummer because he couldn't get vaccinated because he has Guillain-Barré syndrome, and so I was just like reading about their album Ignition sold I think 15,000 copies when it first came out. I think it was Epitaph. And then when Smash came out, it just took the country by storm.
I think it might still be like the biggest selling record to ever come out in an independent record label.
Yes, that's fact. Wow. That's true.
Yep.
And so these guys were like true punk rock underdogs. They weren't really going to go anywhere. And then all of a sudden it was mainstream. I'm watching this music video for Gotta Get Away, which was, I think it was their third single off of Smash, which is, like as you mentioned, the biggest independent release of all time. And I see these like young people moshing and, just raging out, and like this teenage angst from Gen X. And now Gen X have become such like pro-establishment shills, rage on behalf of the machine. They're just totally in favor of the machine. Bad Religion, totally in favor of the machine.
Tom Morello is doing a newsletter for the New York Times right now. He has done one of those masterclass things. I mean, he is like the poster boy for selling out.
So you're a little bit young, I guess, though. But like, what happened, man? I mean, you were old enough to see Smash come out. You played. What happened to this generation? How did they go from being like... What you got to understand about a punk album, that this music was not popular. It was not mainstream.
Trashy.
And then all of a sudden, 1 million albums are sold or whatever. It's like it's smashing records. And all of a sudden, now it is becoming mainstream. I guess these people, the Offspring have a song on their first album whose name I can't say because it's a crime to say. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
They removed it eventually. It's no longer... The only way you can listen to it on YouTube by finding the full album version, and then it's the last song on the album. We cannot say the name of this song. It is a crime to say because it involves the president.
Spicy.
They get rid of it eventually. So it's almost like these guys are anti-establishment up until someone slides the money under their door, and then all of a sudden they're willing to fillet the state.
So I'm kind of a music journalist, and I could go off forever on the whole, alternative indie thing and like what happened specifically there. But just to go back to sort of the broader cultural thing, there's this humorist named Joe Queenan, and he wrote this book that's basically a Jeremiah against the baby boomers, of which he is one. And there's this great line in there about the baby boomers. He says, they were not the first generation to sell out, but they were the first generation to sell out and then insist they hadn't. And I think that's largely true of like every successive generation since then. I think the ones that have been subject to this onslaught of popular culture and mass media, it's very hard to get old and not, withstand the peer pressure and be kind of like a true sort of like American, rugged individualist. In that environment.
It's amazing. It's amazing to me listening to a couple of the songs the Offspring put out. Americana, they had "Why Don't You Get a Job?" Literally a song about getting a job because you're a lazy bum who won't pay the bills. Then they had the song, I can't remember which album this was. I don't think it might have been a conspiracy one. I'm not sure. Hit That, which is about hookup culture and how our country's basically in trouble because people are just going around partying and hooking up and not caring about having kids and a family. And I'm like, talk about a conservative punk rock band. Mm-hmm. But now where they're at, it's like you put the money in their hands. Rage Against the Machine quickly rages on behalf of that machine in 2 seconds.
Well, the Rage Against the thing, though, let's be clear, that always pissed me off, right? Their first record came out on like Sony and Columbia, and they're all talking about like Marx and the liner notes and all of that. They were never raging against the machine. This is a true story. At the 2016 our Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Prophets of Rage were doing one of their which was Tom Morello's like side project with Chuck D. They were doing some appearance at some protest or whatever, and I literally like leaped over the bushes and like tracked down Tom Morello, and I asked him finally after like 20 years. I said, does the irony of getting, large crowds to shout F you, I won't do what you tell me, in unison over and over again, did that ever like occur to you? Does it ever bother you? And literally he said it something like to me like he had never even thought of it. And like that's the issue in a nutshell. Like these people think they're rebelling when they're not. They're literally doing the opposite. They're literally encouraging people to march in lockstep and somehow telling themselves that they're anti-establishment at the same time. That cognitive dissonance is killing us.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And I think we were at that protest, 2016 at the Cleveland, was it DNC or RNC?
RNC.
At least I remember talking to Chuck D there specifically about relating issues. But you made a very good point. There's nothing better that could be ever promoted is for individualism, people to think for themselves and to just be critical thinkers. And a lot of these people are like, cheer for me, clap for me. And you just got to love multi-million-dollar communists.
You don't have to be smart to be a musician. That was one thing in high school was like, if you're not smart, be a musician, pretty much.
I was at VidCon a few years ago. It was
Yeah.
at the big YouTube convention. And I saw some little kids. And as I'm walking past, one kid goes, he's got to be like 10 years old. He goes, you have 80 followers? How did you get so many followers? And then some other kids like, dude, I have 93 on Instagram. And I'm like, these kids are going to be narcissists. Entrepreneurs,
the internet,
but
kinda,
narcissists.
I want to hear what you guys think about the internet and how it changed the music industry completely. Like we had Nirvana, didn't just scream it out. And like
it's all fake.
Then the internet came out and it is kind of all fake.
It's all fake.
I mean, the underground music scene isn't fake. When you get together with your friends,
no, of course, you
smash
I'm saying
a show.
like when I was reading about the Offspring, I was genuinely surprised by their history. They made an album that the song Tehran is a great song. I love that song. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah.
The original. It's just a good song, whether or not you like the message.
Right.
Then they had Ignition come out, and they weren't selling. They were nobodies. The music wasn't popular. Imagine, just like writing music, people it's not mainstream, and then all of a sudden it becomes mainstream. That right there is where I'm like, wow, that's the coolest thing ever. And then to see how they instantly became just corporate machine, I'm just like, wow, that like just guts the whole idea.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they're like, hey, we made it. We got to preserve this power we've made and not be true to ourselves.
Yeah, well, what happened in the early 90s there was a real anomaly culturally. And I think that's what made it so impactful, though, in the sense that there was this very much a DIY corporate suspicion culture in, Gen X. Punk rock was all about rebelling against that in an actually sincere way, and there were people like Ian MacKaye and other things like that were actually committed to that. And I remember when Sonic Youth signed to Geffen, there was like a lot of hand wringing among people like, is this a thing that they are allowed to do because they're such beacons of integrity? And of course, Sonic Youth were like, yeah, we need health insurance. We're like old and have a family now. And like you could be like somewhat sympathetic to that. But it was also true that the music industry was a victim of itself in terms of they had, and I think there are sort of parallels to like what's going on today in a lot of ways, where they had like force fed so much of the same crap to people. Like when I was growing up in the late 80s and you turn on the radio, you had two choices, Led Zeppelin or Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
And that was like it. And for people were desperate for some other thing. And then when like Nirvana and some of these other things started to like really break through, the music industry didn't know what to do with themselves. They were just throwing money at bands, hoping that something would stick. And as a result, what happened is you got all of these, bands that, never in a million years, like who on earth would sign Dinosaur Jr. to a major label record deal? But, the fact that a band like Dinosaur Jr. actually got, $250,000 to record an album meant that they were able to do something great they never would have been able to do. So it was actually that marriage of sort of corporate, money combined with what that allowed them to do in terms of, well, at least back in the day before you had plugins and laptops and recording technology. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. You'd actually matter whether you got into an expensive studio with trained recording engineers and things like that. So it was actually a confluence of establishment and the underground that actually made things good, weirdly enough. And that was, I think, for a long time kind of a strength where there were aspects of American culture where, sort of the trained, well-resourced establishment would meet up with originality. And that was American innovation. And we used to do, obviously there were always corporate sellouts, but we used to see those kinds of leaps regularly, where all of a sudden the establishment would catch wind with something that was going on that was new and original and exciting, and those things would marry up. And we're not seeing that anymore. In fact, what we're seeing right now with the media establishment, they should be like figuring out what the next thing is. But they're still clinging to the cable news business model.
The issue, I suppose, is when the left started to there's a lot of things that happened in the culture war that resulted in the left becoming morally authoritarian. But because we've always kind of been a culture of, hey, racism is bad, sexism is bad, we should respect each other and respect civil liberties, when the moral authoritarians adopted those stances, advertisers just went, look, nobody wants to be a racist, so we'll just put money behind whatever they say, and we'll not put money behind anything they complain about. So like the Dave Chappelle thing.
Yeah.
Why should anyone cancel Dave Chappelle from a festival? Because they're scared of the activists showing up and making them look bad and them losing money. So what should have happened, if you look at least when I was growing up, the moral authoritarian right, the religious, and many of the Democrats were not cool. So nobody cared.
Right.
It was fun to be anti-establishment, to rage against the machine, and that's what was making money. So they said, now the big companies are like, we're going to get a bunch of protesters and we're going to lose money because they're unwilling to compromise. There you go. Then you lose it.
Yeah.
So I think the interesting thing is we are seeing this. Babylon Bee.
Yeah.
Absurdly funny. And predicting the future. Apparently Seth's psychic.
Prophecy fulfilled.
They do a really good job of poking so much fun that these things actually they just end up happening. And it's done. They've been doing a lot better than The Onion has, because when you're scared to be offensive, you're not funny. So what I think we'll start seeing is now people who don't care about being offensive, which tend to be the cultural right, if whatever right wing actually means at this point, they're going to make shows, they're going to make movies, they're going to do comedy specials, everyone's going to love it. I think the left is shutting down their own industry by being scared to take risks and actually challenge.
I think the Babylon Bee thing makes me very nervous when they'll do stories. For instance, like just ridiculous, like Joe Biden declares it illegal to be a man, and then it'll be like, so, and then 2 months later, Joe Biden declares it illegal to be, and it's like they see that and they're like, oh, okay, people didn't say no to it, that's a green light, let's go. So it's like an authoritarian gateway. If you're not careful, satire can be.
I don't
Warning,
know.
guys,
No,
be careful.
I disagree with you. I think it's just making fun of the absolute ridiculousness of our current society. One of the things that I just retweeted from the Babylon Bee is their latest headline saying, quote, Fauci hopes his experiments on puppies will distract everyone from experiments he performed on humanity for the past 18 months. So it's like it's social commentary to the highest level of using comedy as a way to make people laugh at the absurdity of reality. And there are some people bowing down, there are some people giving up, but there still is a hunger for those real honest real discussions. And very interestingly, Netflix just launched a new show called Inside Job, and it was #1 trending. And I just watched one episode of it, and like my jaw dropped to the floor. I was like, no freaking way. I mean, they brought up issues that we would say here, automatically cut. And they brought up all the conspiracies that ever existed in a brilliant, funny way, from Bilderberg and even deeper level stuff that you wouldn't even imagine. So they just released a very spicy cartoon show that goes into how corporations are controlling the world. I still haven't made up my mind on it. It's funny, but it also is very deep. I still haven't watched all the episodes. I'm in the process of watching it. But for them to release that on the backdrop of Chappelle might be sending a message. I might be reading into too much of it. There's a lot of things I'm critical of Netflix about. But I think there's a reason this show and other shows are doing so well and have such a loving, caring audience that are even here when they're not even prompted to be here, unlike CNN. CNN has everything going for them. We don't.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.